Welcome to 16.3. This video will focus on one kind of mechanoreception. The ear, as you might know, of course, is involved in hearing. It also has another special sense associated with it, balance. So let's look at, first off, the parts of the ear, and then work our way to a conversation about balance. First is a cute cartoon. This is what we say to dogs, what they hear. This is about cats, what they choose to hear. Nothing. Haha, don't like cats. So anyway, okay. Let's look at the parts of the ear. And when we say ear, we tend to focus on the thing that's sticking on the outside of our head. Actually, that's just one part of the ear. The ear actually has an external, middle, and inner region, and we'll focus on these individually. I put these in red, indicating the external or outer ear. So the part that we see that extends on the outside is going to be called, technically, this whole thing that extends is the pinna, is this piece that's on the outside. The helix is just this part that's especially rounded, kind of the margins of it. And the part that hangs down here is called the lobule. Some people actually take pointy metal and poke it through there and then dangle metal or plastic from it. I don't. But the lobule actually is that part that hangs down. It could be attached directly, run right into your ear, or it could have a hanging down part, and that's genetic, and it doesn't really matter which one you have. This part here, this tube, is called the external auditory or external acoustic meatus. Either term is correct. And it's going to have within it, of course, the glands that we associate with earwax production. And the tympanic membrane is either the end of the external ear or the beginning of the middle ear, depending on who you talk to. Here, I just made it the end of it, but technically you're going to find all these structures considered here as part of the middle ear. Why is the ear shaped the way it is? How does anatomy reflect physiology? It does help us echolocate. It helps us determine the direction of sound. A sound that occurs on one side or the other from us, we actually can help determine its location by how quickly it reaches either ear. Sounds that are directly above our heads actually are difficult for us to echolocate. Sounds that are behind us are sometimes a little difficult for us to figure out where they are too. If it's anywhere kind of within our ear range, we can very easily pick up and point to the direction that that sound comes from. The middle ear, and again, depending on the tympanic membrane being part of that, the eardrum, also includes the auditory ossicles. The smallest bones of the body are the ear bones, the malleus, incus, and stapes, and we'll discuss their role more when we get to hearing. But let me show you. Okay, this is the malleus, this part here. This is the incus, and the stapes is kind of the horseshoe-shaped piece right here. And it actually has a little membrane behind this called the oval window, and we'll again focus on that role when we get into hearing too. You also see this tube that extends, this tube that extends here. This is the pharyngeal tympanic tube or the auditory tube. This actually will end up, do you know where? This tube actually ends up going to your pharynx or to your throat. And when you swallow, you can equalize the pressure on either side of your eardrum, and that your ears may pop, for example, if you're going into a different pressure altitude. If you swallow, sometimes they'll help you equalize the pressure, and your ears will feel better. So out here, of course, it's just going to be space. In this area here, it's just going to be air as well, unless, of course, you have an ear infection, and you may accumulate fluid in here and create pressure, and that pressure is responsible for the earache. Incidentally, this pharyngeal tympanic tube in adults is fairly sharp. It's fairly acute, moving toward a pharynx. In kids, it's a little more horizontal, and that presents a problem for kids because they can have frequent ear infections. And therefore, one way of trying to make sure we don't get the accumulation of bacteria and the accumulation of all the stuff that comes with bacteria is to insert tubes. A tiny incision is made in the eardrum. A tube is put in there to help the the ear drain so you don't build up bacteria and you don't get frequent ear infections. Some people are a little hesitant about this because they're concerned about their child's hearing. Actually, if you have repeated bacterial infections of the eardrum, it can cause some scarring of the eardrum, and that can actually impede hearing as well. Eventually, once these tubes are put in, they will usually fall out on their own. It's kind of hard to get a sense of the size, but they are tiny. You can probably get 8 or 10 of them on the size of a dime. They're not very big at all. And finally, I'll show you the inner ear. Just again, we'll focus on just one part of it as far as our balance conversation. But there's really 3 basic regions of the inner ear. And again, to give you some orientation, okay, that external ear is out here. The middle ear is here. Here's the eardrum missing. Here's the malleus, incus, and stapes. And now all of these curly parts inside here represent the inner ear. So we have these semicircular canals. That's one region of the inner ear. We have the utricle and the saccule, which are a little hard to see here, but they're kind of these bulby parts in this sort of central section of the inner ear. And then we have this snail-shaped thing. This is called the cochlea. The semicircular canals and the utricle and the saccule, they are responsible for mechanoreception related to balance. The cochlea is responsible for mechanoreception that we associate with hearing. The nerve coming out of this region is the vestibular nerve, because vestibular means balance. The nerve coming from the cochlea is the cochlear nerve, and they're going to fuse to form the vestibulocochlear nerve, one of the cranial nerves. And again, we'll deal with this part in just a second, well, in the next video. Let's deal with over here and just figure out how your body knows how you're balanced, or if you're balanced. So there's 2 kinds of balance. There's the static equilibrium, which is where is your head? When your head is perfectly still, or your head is leaning one direction or another, how does your body know that? And first off, maybe, and more importantly, why does your body need to know that? If you're walking around like this and your head is tilted, you're going to have to adjust your muscles and your balance so you don't fall over. You have to be able to detect, you have to propriocept, know your body's position in space so that you can respond accordingly with the right muscle contractions. So it is important to know if your head is leaning over or if your head is upright. How does your body detect that? Well, in the utricle, and you see this part here, you have this little mass of tissue which is making up what's called the otolithic membrane. That's really just the part here, these kind of the white iceberg on top, if you will. But the otolithic membrane is actually on top of or around these hair bundles. These are hairs that are sticking up from this supporting gel, and each of these is actually attached to a nerve fiber. So essentially, if this membrane moves at all, it's going to push the hair cells one way or the other, and that's how your body knows what your head's position is. Well, what's going to move that membrane? Inside of that membrane, you're going to have otoliths. Otoliths, if you recognize that term at all, lith refers to rock or stone. You actually have these little stones, these little pieces right here are actually tiny rocks. Are you saying I have rocks in my head? Yes, you have rocks in your head. Rocks are actually attached to this otolithic membrane, so if you tilt your head, you're going to get all the rocks are going to be moving one direction like a tiny little landslide. And when the tiny little landslide pushes on those hair bundles, that's going to cause a deflection, which is going to result in a nerve signal. Let me show you here. So this just shows you if your head is upright, in the complete upright position, then there really is no nerve signal, and your nerve impulses that are generated are going to be very stable. Your brain interprets this pattern as their head is in a straight position. If you bend your head one direction, and I'm not going to hold you responsible for which way is which, but you actually result in either a depolarization or a hyperpolarization. You either bend toward or away from those hair cells, And because that will result in a change in the frequency, your brain interprets that frequency change as a change in your head position. So that's your static equilibrium. That's when your head is not moving. What if your head is moving? We have those semicircular canals, and you only see, well, you can see them up here kind of sort of, sorry, you can see them up here a little bit. Those semicircular canals actually are going to have fluid in there that's going to do something similar. It's going to cause a deflection on a receptor, which helps your body figure out, helps your brain figure out what your head is doing. They're showing you just one of them down here. They're showing you the horizontal one. Let me go back just a second to show you this. So we're talking about this one here. Notice this one has fluid in it, and there's a little receptor right here. So imagine that your head begins to move in this way. You're kind of moving in a circle. If you're moving in a circle, what happens to the fluid? The fluid begins to move inside that tube, inside that canal, and begins to push on this cupula, this bundle of receptors which are connected to a vestibular nerve. If you push on it one way, your brain goes, oh, their head must be going this way. If you push on it another way, their head must be going that way. And maybe you've tried this experiment before. You've spun around 3 or 4 times, and then you stopped, and then you spun back around again, and you might have noticed that you were less dizzy because you took the cupula one way and you began to move it back the other. But why do we get dizzy? If you maybe you've gone to a family picnic and you all played this game where someone runs out, puts their head on a baseball bat, spins around 8 or 10 times and tries to run, and then we all laugh at them when they fall into potato salad. Why are they dizzy? Well, their head is no longer moving, but the fluid is. And when your eyes are trying to train one way and your brain's being told by the vestibular nerves your head is actually moving, that disconnect in signal is a dizziness which causes you to lose your balance. Something similar happens to you when you get motion sickness. You're getting fluid movement, and that disconnect between the fluid movement in your head and what your eyes are seeing can cause you to have a episode on a boat. So dynamic equilibrium is as your head is moving in any plane. So imagine that you are doing a cartwheel or you're spinning around. As your head is moving, this fluid is called endolymph, moves around in those canals, pushes on these cupulas, these combinations of receptors, which sends a signal. Static equilibrium we associate with this membrane, the otolithic membrane, where the tiny landslide of rocks actually pushes on hair cells to tell your body your position. So static is when your head is still, dynamic is when your head is moving. And that wraps up this video.